So welcome back to the PPL. Today we're going over vacuum forming and the vacuum forming process here in the lab. Vacuum forming, it's pretty niche for RC planes that we work on here. Primarily it's nacelles or stuff for motor mounts. So if you want to have a little bit of weight saving, you'll have these vacuum form attachments on fuselages. I've seen some teams do it with wingtips if they want to form the edge of their wingtips to round them off. But yeah, it's primarily for coverage around your motors. In terms of the vacuum forming process in the lab, it's pretty quick and straightforward. It takes like 10-15 minutes in total. The main part of the vacuum forming process is you have to make a base model to vacuum form over. For the most part, they're 3D printed. I'll show you a couple of those later, but that's the primary goal. And then the vacuum former is pretty easy to use itself. We use the Macko form box. We'll have all the prices listed on the lab, but we use Macko form sheets. They're about $1.33 per sheet. So if you plan on using them on your plane, they're not too expensive if you keep it to a pretty limited amount.
So here's just a couple of the molds that teams have made in the past. Starting off here, primarily you'd use a 3D printed model, but this team decided to use a wood type, and then they formed clay over it. That works as well for the form sheet. And then all these teams use 3D printed materials. Ideally, when you vacuum form, you have to be aware of draft angles, so how the air flows out as it heats. Going from an example of one of the forms, you can see it creases super heavily on the part. So if you don't have good draft angles or place where the air flows off, you might get some creases. That can get mitigated by either raising your part so the draft angles appear on a piece of the part that you don't care about, and you can just cut off. You can make channels for it to go more smooth, or you can just raise the height of it a lot. So that's what these teams chose here. You also want, if you do 3D print, you want to make sure the filament is smoothed out, so you'll rub it with some sandpaper. That way the actual vacuum form part is not super porous when you take it off, and that makes getting it off the actual melted form sheet easier. In terms of the form sheets, we only have in the lab right now matte white, but if you want, you can grab clear coat sheets as well. They're pretty standard sheets. This is all going off this part right here, and then here's some wingtips as well. In terms of actually using the form box, your heights, a maximum of around 4 to 5 inches would be best, and you don't want to have, ideally, 2 parts being vacuum formed at the same time on the vacuum form base. Do 1 part, that way all the material is just covering 1 surface. But that's a general overview. There's a detailed data sheet and how to do the sheet that gives more of the specifications for your heights and widths of your objects that you should use, but vacuum forming operation is pretty similar, and we'll go over that now.
Okay, so to get started on the vacuum form sheet, quick material checklist. You need your vacuum former, you need a singular form sheet, you need your form that you're going to vacuum form over. Some teams like to use petroleum jelly or Vaseline to put onto their piece to make it easier to slide out of the vacuum form sheet once it is formed and heated. That is a process that works. It's messy if you want Vaseline on your hands. You'll also probably have some Vaseline residue on your form sheet, but it does help to get it out easier. A lot of times you might have to cut it out, so Vaseline will help make that a little bit better. And then to make those cuts out, you just need a box cutter and then a cutting board. Moving over to actual vacuum form operation itself, all it is the vacuum former, and then it's plugged into a shop vac here in the PPL. I'm gonna quickly spin around the vacuum former. Essentially, you have the hose of the vacuum plugged into the former, and then also it's plugged into the outlet in the vacuum former. The vacuum former itself is plugged into an external power source. It's just that way, once you form down, it automatically turns on the vacuum. So to start the operation, it's pretty simple. You'll see we have 3 dials here. One of them is to start a timer, one of them is to set the timer time, and the other one is to heat up the vacuum form. Every single Macko form sheet has different settings. So for the ones in the lab right now, it has a time temperature setting of 5 with a heating time of 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So what we'll do over here is go to our 3rd dial, and we're gonna turn it to number 5. It's gonna start to heat up, and you can see that the light's flashing. This is gonna flash yellow in the heating process. Once it turns green, that means it's heated and ready to go. Usually this is the longest process of the vacuum former. Should take like 5 to 10 minutes to fully heat up. Light indicates green, meaning that it's fully heated up. We're now going to set the timer. For these form sheets, it says 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. For the matte form sheets, I like to go a little bit longer, so I'll do the 2 minute 20 to get full heating. All I'm gonna do is move over to the timer dial and switch over to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Then I'm gonna load in the form sheet. So these handles, the lower part comes off. I'll drop it all the way down, grab my form sheet and place it in the middle. I'll then re-lift the handles and clamp it back into place. Before I start the heating timer, I need to make sure that the vacuum is turned on. Once that's done, I'm gonna move back here and click the start timer button. It's gonna indicate a flashing yellow light for the 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And then once this is finished, you're ready to vacuum form. Okay, so the form sheet's been heating. You can see that it's actually starting to droop a little bit low on the form sheet, indicating that it's heating well. While it's still heating, I'm going to place in my form just in the middle of the test section area and then wait for the timer to finish. So we have a green light indicating that it's ready to go. The handles you have to push down a little bit hard on initially, but then go slowly over the vacuum form once you're forming. So here we go. Okay, so once the vacuum turns off, the process is completed. You'll lift these handles back up to the top, and then you'll be able to take off your vacuum form piece. That looks like this. We'll let it sit for a little bit. I'm then gonna turn the heater down to 0 in order to get the heater off the machine. And now we'll move on to cutting this piece out. Okay, so here's our completed piece. As you can see, we did get some extra form. That's just from not having great draft angles on the actual object itself. Again, that can be mitigated by raising the height a little bit, introducing some angle yourself on the piece, or just having a little lip on it. So that's something we'll do. But if you're happy with your piece, you'll just use box cutters, scissors, cut around your piece, and finish off your form. Okay, so finished cutting off. It's not the cleanest form of all time, but definitely does the job. But that's all the process is. Pretty quick and simple, honestly 10 minutes. The longest part is the actual heating process. One last thing, when you're using the vacuum former, once you turn off the heater down to 0, let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes just to let the heater fully cool down before you unplug it from the outlet. Other than that, it's a pretty simple process. Lab techs will be in here to help you as well. So thank you guys.